ready, Rick? Oh, just lost Roy.
I'm sorry, did I get that on you?
Thanks for being here live, and for those of you who are online, thank you also for being here tonight. The sign-up sheet for speaking during the comments from the public to the council is over here to your left, my right. If you'd like to speak to us tonight, please make sure that you do sign in. With that, let's move directly into the agenda. The first item on the agenda are chair's announcements. I have none. So we're going to move right into the comments from the public to the council. And I can get it, Jason. There are 4 people who have signed up to speak, and I will call them in the order in which they've signed up. So first off, Roger Cacchetti.
Roger Cacchetti at 5500 Punching Boulevard. I'm proud to have been... Okay. I'm happy and proud to have been a real estate investor for most of the last 40 years. And although I'm not an investor on the scale of some of the people behind major initiatives around here, even a minnow knows how the rules of the ocean work. And as a real estate investor, I have 3 concerns. Number 1, my risk tolerance. Number 2, my investment horizon. And number 3, the maximum possible return on my investment, given those 2 considerations. It is not within my purview to be interested in the impact on the local community or how the impact on the quality of life of people who actually live there. When I invest in Houston or Rockville, let anything go. What do I care about the people who live there? I care about the 3 investment horizons, 3 investment issues that any real estate investor is concerned with. Having said that, I want to return to a proposal that you will never have a PR firm, a law firm, a community relations firm, and a lobbying firm proposing to the planning board or to the council. I've spent a fair amount of time in the last year in Portland, Maine, and in this section of Portland, Maine, which is a little bit similar to Friendship Heights that I've been in, they have several years ago experimented with something I've mentioned before, community garden. The surprising thing to me about community garden, there's a 0 rate of return. Your investment is a complete loss. No investor is going to get behind it, and no lobbyist is ever going to tell you what a fabulous thing it will be. But what I discovered is that it changed the lives of the people who lived in high-rise condominiums around there. It gave them something in their life that changed them. People were growing tomatoes and peppers and string beans and strawberries, and they were competing with each other to see who could have, and they were bringing it home, and if they couldn't eat it, they would donate it to, homeless shelters and stuff like that. I would guess that of the roughly 2,000 households in Friendship Heights Village, 1,000 would sign up for community garden spot. So it is achievable. It changes the lives of the people, particularly people who don't have a backyard of their own, and this gives them a little plot of land to be their own gardener and changes their lives. So I hope somebody will take this up and pursue it, because you're never going to hear a lobbyist tell you what a great idea it is. You're never going to find an investor investing in it. It's got to be something from people who care about the quality of life here. Thanks.
Thank you. Pat Donovan.
I'm Pat Donovan from 4620. I was glad to see on the agenda that you're going to discuss the permitting process for Page Park, because I think it's safe to say that everybody living in this village is increasingly frustrated by the sense of a lack of progress in getting to the reopening of the park. And I was really stunned to get an email a month or so ago from someone who often comments on the park that there had been no inspections of the park. And then to learn from another source last week that, in fact, some of the permits have not even been submitted, that there are subcontractors, I guess, of Green Sweep who have, are just not doing anything in a quick way. And that seems to me totally unacceptable. So when you talk about the park tonight, I hope you will give us the full scope of what the situation is, because I don't feel like we have gotten that, to be honest. And also what the council itself and the village government is doing to move this forward. I just get a sense that you are bystanders, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but this is ridiculous, and we need to have that park open, and I hope if you're going to give us some good news and give us a full report. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois Foster? Forster? Forster. Sorry,
That's okay.
I see the R now.
E.M.
Yeah.
Forster, but no relation, unfortunately.
And a double R there, too. Yeah.
I wasn't going to speak on Page Park, but I guess I can understand maybe why the county is taking its time, maybe. I don't know. We don't know, and maybe we'll hear more about it later. But I've certainly been concerned. I know dog walkers go through there, but they also go through there not just on the path, but in the gardens with their dogs, and they've destroyed a lot of plant material. So once this is all resolved with regard to the permit, I hope that an evaluation is done of the park and its plantings, because they were quite beautiful. But I suspect, and I'm just going to throw out a number, using labor, cost, and plant material, probably about $3,000 or $4,000 worth of plant material are gone, just gone. And so that's kind of upsetting as a taxpayer, and a better fencing should have been put around the park. And I hope some consideration, if some beautiful plants go back in again, some ideas of fencing or something to keep dog walkers off. They're going to have the grassy area. There are going to be grassy issues with urine, dog urine, I mean, and so forth, killing the grass, and that'll have to be repaired from time to time. But killing plant material is pretty costly. So that was one point. That was not what I was going to say. I just want to say that I am generally in support of off-duty police presence in the village. I sometimes come home late at night, not too late, but it could be 10 or 11 after seeing friends out for dinner downtown and using the metro system. So I do support that. I would like more details about off-duty, whether they're in uniform or not, how it gets paid for, et cetera. But I certainly not, I would feel more comfortable with that kind of thing. I'm glad it's on the agenda to be talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey?
Yes, thank you. First, let me start by thanking Mayor White, Julian, Ann, and the rest of our staff for bringing in a new art curator. I believe that over the last 11 or 12 years, we had some fantastic art, but in the last couple, it had gotten stale and repetitive for whatever reason. So I really appreciate that, and I think it's on the right track. Now, I wanted to speak to a new group that's been formed called the Women of Friendship Heights. I read it in the newsletter, and I always looked at this at the village as being very open and inclusive. But as I understand, the women's group, for whatever reason, it sounds political to me, no men are allowed, and no women under 50. I'm just not sure how things in this village can only affect women who are 50 or more. So my questions are, why is the group discriminating against taxpayers based on age? Why is the group discriminating against taxpayers based on sex? I'd like to see a copy of the Women's Friendship Heights Charter, and I want to know what the what the Women of Friendship Heights paid for the use of the space on May 16th. I want to know who is responsible for both legal and financial issues for this new entity. Is it Martha Salt or Patricia Canessa? I want to know if our treasurer, Mr. Schaefer, who's been very detailed about our finances, I want to know if he is okay having our taxpayer-funded space used by an entity that discriminates on the basis of sex and age. I would like to know what council members support our taxpayer-funded village center space being open and inclusive to all village residents. I'd like to have these answer these questions in 2 weeks. After that, and I will be going to whatever state or county entities that I have to speak to if this is going to continue. And in closing, I don't want to see a nickel of my taxpayer money or my wife's taxpayer money going for any legal answers to the questions I just asked. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Do you have other comments to make to us tonight?
I knew you wouldn't have any.
Thank you very much. That is the last person who has signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who didn't have an opportunity to sign up? Yes, please.
I'm Cameron Moody. I'm in the Elizabeth. I wanted to state something that's only tangentially related to it. This is only tangentially related to what Mr. Dorsey just said, but we have a lot of meetings that occur, whether they're budget and finance committees or other village-related committees, and they take place during the day, oftentimes not even during the lunch hour, which makes it nearly impossible for people who are not senior citizens often to attend if you have to work. I think that it would be worthwhile to explore having meetings at hours where you can get a more diverse customer base, us being the village as the customers. I also wanted to speak on something that occurred at the Friendship Heights Alliance during the last meeting. We had a speaker who is a Friendship Heights resident who works for bookings, and she works with development. It was nice for her to be the speaker because she's actually in the townhouse community that's directly behind Friendship Heights Center, which is going to get that new high-rise in the coming years. And she was very pro development for the neighborhoods. She spoke to the fact that we have a lot of interest from businesses and retail that we haven't seen in the past several years, and that's probably because of the catalyst that these new developments are causing. She raised a good point that the development that is coming down the pipeline is probably very likely going to happen, and that it's going to be important that we as communities decide what our asks are going to be. Unfortunately, a lot of what occurs is reactionary, and because I think we see time and time again, whether it's the replacement for Brooks Brothers, the development of West Bard, the development of the Purple Line, there is a desire and an appetite for increased development in the county. And so because that is more probable for us, it's important for us to know what we're going to go to the developers ask for and make sure that it's a clear and concise message each time, whether it's project specific or a larger ask that we want for the community, because I think that we're going to find it futile and possibly quite expensive to fight the developments. We need to make sure that what they're getting, we feel comfortable with what we're getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken who wishes to speak? If not, then we'll move on to the next item, which are comments from the...
Chairman, I didn't catch the first name of Ms. Forster, please.
Lois. Thank you. Other comments from the council? Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
So I'd like to address the comment directed to me by Mr. Dorsey. I don't believe we spent any funds for that women's group, did we? Okay.
No.
Okay, so that,
Mr. Schaefer, Councilman Schaefer, if I may, the council was addressed. We'll look into a response to him rather than getting into a conversation, which
Okay.
is not part of this.
okay.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the council? Seeing none, mayor's announcements. Mayor White?
Mark your, mark your calendars for our annual Independence Day celebration on Thursday, July 4th at the Village Center and outside in Humphrey Park. Announcements will be posted on the village website through our email and text alert system and in the newsletter.
Thank you, Mayor White. That brings us to the approval of the minutes, the public session minutes of the April 8th council meeting. Councilwoman Zoll.
Can you forgive me? I didn't act fast enough. Could I just make an announcement?
Sure.
Or,
Yes.
As Mr. Dorsey is aware, we have started a new group for women, an affinity group.
Councilwoman Zoll, if I may, the same request that I
okay.
made to Councilman Schaefer, which
No,
is,
it wasn't in response. It was just announcing that it exists.
okay.
Okay.
Let's
And
not, may I? Yeah.
your choice, but
Thank you.
just
Let's
stop
not
is
get
what you're
into
saying.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Councilwoman Salt, the minutes for April 8th?
Yes. I move to adopt the minutes of April 8th, which are under tab 2.
There's been a motion to support and approve the minutes of the April 8th council meeting. Is there support for that motion? Mayor White, support? Okay. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
I'm going to stick with the,
All those opposed say no. I know,
okay.
I know. Councilwoman Salt?
Yes, I want to do roll call vote on all the votes
Okay.
for
we'll-
the meeting.
Yeah, we'll do it one at a time. So on this one, would you like to call the roll?
Yes, please. Air,
Yes.
Measy, Schaefer,
Yes.
sorry, Schaefer, yes. Salt, yes. Tyler? Tyler, yes. White?
Yes.
White, yes. Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk, abstain.
Thank you. Next item, the motion to approve the April 8th council meeting minutes has been approved. On to the treasurer's report. Councilman Schaefer.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to speak for 25 minutes, by the way. So I'd like to, we have some slides. Mr. Caccetti will probably be happy we're advancing our technology. But if we could put up the slide for the proposed budget, it was amended slightly at the April committee meeting. And no, the new proposed budget.
Excuse me, Councilman Schaefer, there's a question from a council member.
Are we doing the treasurer report?
Well, I could roll this into, I wanted to sort of break out the
Only reason I
Budget.
ask is because you have the treasury report, and then there is a section for the finance.
right.
For the budget.
I mean, I'm open to doing it either way. I was going to break up the budget. If
Well,
you'd rather I do it all
Can we go over
at
the
once.
report first?
Yeah, so the report really consists of the budget, and which I could talk about later, and also going through the Finance Committee meeting and what we voted on. But, yeah, that's fine. We can roll it into one.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Does that conclude the treasurer's report then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moves us to the village manager's report.
Thank you. Two quick items. Number one, we are in the testing phase for our chat bot for the website, the enhanced search feature that we'll be hoping to roll out in the near future. We're working with the vendor CityBot on some rigorous testing to make sure that the bot knows everything that's in the website, all the content on all the pages of the website, so that it will be able to answer people's questions and direct you to the correct information you're looking for on the website. We do need to do some more testing and make sure that it's good to go before we launch it. So we will be providing some updates in the near future on when we anticipate launching, but we don't want to rush it before it's ready. So look for more updates soon. Yes.
Julian, if you can juggle my memory, please, on how the bot is going to act. Is it interactive, or how is it going to act?
Yeah, it'll show up on the lower right-hand section of the screen when you first go onto the website. And you've seen these on other websites. It's a little, and its name is Holly. It's a little holly leaf, which is sort of representative of the village, and it's called Holly. So you'll be able to ask Holly a question. She'll say, "How can I help you?" She'll have an introductory statement, and you type in whatever question you have, and she'll provide a link if it's a search question. We'll also have some external links that are on our website that it will know to answer information for that, such as who's my representative in Congress, who's my county council person, and it will give you a link to that person's page. So it should be pretty comprehensive in terms of its ability to find all the information on the website.
Will we be able to know later how the bot has increased or decreased or confused people? Only reason I ask is because we have a bot that is used in our building where we live, and you use the bot to call for reports and stuff, and the bot has messed up some things in translation. So will we get how do they test that to know if it's working to the spot that it should be working?
Yeah, we're testing right now. So initially, when we started asking some questions at the outset, we found that it was giving some false information, or information wasn't quite right, and sometimes it depends on the wording of the question. So, but it does have a self-learning capability as a piece of AI. So it does pick up and learn when you keep asking questions and trying to refine the answers. So that's what should be happening. I mean, of course, there will probably be some hiccups, and if you don't quite ask the question in the right way, you might get wrong information. But we will, when we put out the marketing for this, we'll make sure we tell everybody, if you're experiencing difficulties, call us, email us, and we want to keep working on it so that the bot keeps learning and provides better information every time. That's the goal.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing. I want to make it clear that if someone asks for information that's not on our website, the bot will not make an answer up like you've seen on the news with other chatbots. It's only our website. So if somebody asks, did the New York Rangers win the other night? Personal favorite. It'll say, sorry, I do not understand. Please contact the front desk. We've ensured that feature because I've read in the news all sorts of wacky events of people asking very controversial questions and getting controversial answers. So we've made sure that that's not going to happen. You may get a wrong answer at this stage, but that answer will relate to the content on the website. So like Julian said, we're streamlining that process now.
Okay.
That I'm glad to hear that, because that's what started off with problems with Alexa. And they had some real serious problems, and so they had to go back and change. So that's good to know. That's a good one. Thank you.
And then our front desk will have to know if the Rangers won, but we'll have to do some extra training there. Or we relate them to Jason. He'll be glad to tell them. Quick second item is we had the county police put up some speed radar signs on Willard Avenue recently. I think it was the last week in April. And they did some data collection for 1 week. About 40,000 vehicles had their speed recorded, eastbound and westbound on Willard. And we received the data feedback, which showed that the sort of aggregate average speed was right around at the speed limit and actually a little bit below. Eastbound was a little bit higher than westbound, but both of them were at the speed limit or below. So the data does not support having a speed camera on Willard Avenue. Under the existing rules, the criteria for the county, you need to have an average speed of 10 miles or more over the speed limit, so it would have had to be 35 plus to warrant a camera. So it does not look like from this data that we will be getting a speed camera on Willard, which I know people have inquired about before, unless something changes with future data. But this is what we've received from the police. The radar signs have been removed. They are moving them around to different jurisdictions. We will inquire to see if we can get them to come back and just have the signs that display people's speed, which has been shown to reduce speeds when you see your speed reflected as you're driving. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the village manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. First report is from Councilwoman Tyler, Public Safety Committee.
First, I'd like to say a big thank you to Julian and Jason. This committee was formed just a little over a year ago, and a lot of things Julian and Jason did prior to this committee, they did what they could with what they had to work with. And I've learned a lot working with Julian in particular in discussing and looking at safety concerns, issues, how we look at the village and how we look at our residents, how we look at our business community, how we're affected on a lot of things. And moving forward, when the agreement, the MOU, as the proper name for it, was signed, it's been a little over a year for that. And many of you have picked up the copies of the report from Captain Kokinos. And it was a year-end report. I sat in on a meeting with Julian and Captain Kokinos regarding everything that's transpired this year. Not only, you know, everybody asked that one question, well, what do the police do? And I will say in a lot of things you can always, you know, it's not a visual, tangible thing. It's not an apple equals an apple, or it's not always what you see. What goes on behind the scenes is what makes it look like it does right now. And I used a comparison of, I just came back from a big event in New York where an organization was celebrating their 50th anniversary, and it was a very big organization and very well-known organization with representatives not only from the United States but from 30 countries. They never had security in 50 years, and they didn't understand it. And I apply that to the same rationale here, because people are always thinking, well, I have to see it. Well, after a week of about 25 people working under me, the compliments from the president, the CEO, the COO, and everybody else said, we never knew you were there, but you have now elevated us to a level that we can't go back. And they never knew the little things that went on behind the scenes. And if you look at just, I'm not going to go through his entire report, but if you read some of the things that were done and looked at and worked on throughout the year, I think many of you will be surprised. And as I said, Julian and I worked a great deal together on a lot of these issues and a lot of the topics for the police to even go and work forward on on coming up with some of these things. For example, who knew that they did over 800 traffic violations over the year? Assisted parking enforcement 63 times with registration information. 13 parking disputes, 15 car accidents. There was theft, 11 thefts from businesses in our community, 7 auto thefts, fraud, lost property, assaults. You don't see these things because they're behind the scenes working. And Captain Coquinos and Julia and I are always on the emails talking about different things. We get calls about the fake report that happened that someone was assaulted on Willard Avenue somewhere between Chipotle and Miwa. Well, Captain Coquinos looked up real quick. There was no report. It did not occur. So having that ability to be able to dismantle rumors and issues quickly has been an asset because we're able to talk to them. If you look more, there's a lot of responses of 142 police emergency calls within the village. So a lot has been done, and hopefully this will answer some of the questions that many of you have and have wondered, what do they do here? They do a lot in this community. They do a lot with the businesses. We have a better working relationship with the businesses now. We have meetings with the residents. We've had meetings with the business owners. We've had meetings with your managers in your property buildings. So we're trying to build a more cohesive group and for them to feel comfortable and secure to know that the village council really is there for them. Julian sends out a lot of emails to them. I mean, we work on stuff and I'll write something up and say, okay, you fix it and dial it up. And we go back and forth. It's been a tremendous amount of work that's been done on this side and crossing over to build a relationship with DC Police, with Metro, and you've heard us talk about the alliance that we're working with them on. There's a lot that I cannot repeat it enough. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So looking at this report, you'll see most of the things that were done this year, and I commended Captain Coquinos and the team of people that have, the officers that have been working here. They also use our area to help train some of the new cadets because of not only the community, but also because of the way the streets are. They're hilly, they're curvy, they know how to get around them if they've got to go in a pursuit. So this relationship has really been important. It's also helped us move to another seat at the table with our Montgomery County Council. I don't know if any of you paid attention, if you're, have boring hours like I do sometimes. You sit and watch the council channel, and you'll find out that the county council just passed the budget for drones. The drone was a huge step in the right direction, but President Friesden was not going to pass that budget if it did not include Bethesda and Gaithersburg. There was a lot of issues and concerns about that. Well, having it in Bethesda, believe it or not, benefits us because the drone will now see all the way down to Willard Avenue. We're in a no-fly zone, and it's a very sticky situation. But because of that and us working together, that drone is now going to be able to assist down in this area as well. The drone is for public. It's for helping officers in real-time situations. We don't have to pay for it. There's nothing coming out of our budget. They aren't going to post anything here. It's going to be launched on a very high building in downtown Bethesda. So we will benefit from it. But this year has been a very productive year for this committee and working with Montgomery County Police, but also working with Julian and Jason. And I got a chance to really work a great deal with you, more than I probably would have just as a council member, and I thank you for it. I mean, we've had some fun times. We look at the cameras in the office and say, oh, gee, that's got a good angle to it, okay. And we look at a lot of equipment. So it's been a great year as the chair of this committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tyler.
Please read the report, and if you don't have a copy, get a copy before you leave.
Any questions for Councilwoman Tyler from the council? Councilman Measy?
Cheryl, I should know this, but let me know, what are these drones supposed to be doing?
The drones under Montgomery County's program, I think Captain Kokinos gave a presentation to the business community, and it mostly affects the business community in the sense that it protects them and it's easier for the police to help out. Granted, we are not, Bethesda has a real crime problem that some council members, I will say, don't think they have a crime problem because they're put into the category that you're in Bethesda, you don't have crime. Downtown Bethesda has a big crime problem. So the drones are going to do what they did in an experiment program in LA in the Rodeo Drive area where they didn't think they needed drones. They will be able to do things in real time. If a call comes in and says that there is a robber and they're running down the street now or the store is being robbed, they will be able to call in and that drone can be able to be launched within seconds to get up and see where it is, and then that helps the police really go in faster instead of having to drive around and look around. The problem we have in this area, and Captain Kokinos talked with Julian and I about it, is that there's a great deal of theft at the Gap. Even though Saks is not in our jurisdiction, a lot of it is at Saks. We all know Amazon, I hate to say Amazon's probably gonna go out of business because of the theft, but the Amazon Fresh, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Gap. The biggest problem is that the workers or clerks in the stores, they don't call the police.
So the drone is a response, uses in a response to a call or a situation. The drone is not involved with routine surveillance,
No.
hovering around.
You can't do that, that's illegal to do. So the drone, you
Okay.
can't just send it up and hover around like that. That's against the law.
I feel better.
Yeah, and the drone is not gonna zoom in on your house and your windows and stuff like that. That's not what it's for. The drone is literally there, and they have used that drone in downtown Silver Spring and Wheaton, where the crime is, the police just are outnumbered to get to where they need to be. It's also, they did the story on, I think I talked about it a while back, they did the story on 60 Minutes and showed where Montgomery County in LA went into a joint trial program, and it showed where the drone also worked on the positive, that where people called in and said, oh, there's a person with a gun, they look like they're robbing a person, and the drone could zoom in and get a clear picture that the person had a cell phone and they weren't robbing anybody. So it's worked both ways, and it's helped with solving things that they can solve faster.
Other questions? Seeing none, then Councilman Schaefer, report from the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you. So we had a meeting on April 16th. It's probably the last meeting we're going to have for a while. And I think it was very productive. We took several votes. The first vote we took, if you saw the presentation last month, we had a line item in the budget to contribute $25,000 to our reserve fund, the newly created reserve fund, which is an important thing to have, and we will need to start doing. Having said that, we took it out of the proposed budget, and the reason was it was sort of a compromise. So in exchange for having the deposit in the coming fiscal year, we voted, and it was a unanimous vote, to when we get the money from the air rights, the $1 million, to put $500,000 of that additionally into our reserve fund, which would create a balance of $1.5 million less whatever is spent to that point. And again, that vote was unanimous. The council will be taking that up for a vote later on. We took a few additional votes. We voted on, this was the result of an RFP continuing the auditor for the next 3 years. We had 3 bids. One was ridiculously high. The other 2 were in line, but and they were close, but the lower one was from the one that does our current audit. And the vote to continue with them was 2-0. There was 1 abstention, which was me, because we didn't have a great deal of time to review the material, so that's why I abstained. Since then, I have reviewed the material. I called the partner on the audit and spoke to him, and I'm satisfied. I'm happy to go along with that recommendation. So when we vote, the council could consider that a unanimous recommendation from the Finance Committee. We took a vote to move our main accounts from Capital Bank to People's Bank. The reason is Capital was going to start charging a lot of fees if we didn't maintain very high balances. And Donna prepared an analysis for us, and we relied on her research and her recommendations, so I wanted to thank her. That vote was also unanimous to move the account. I don't think the council needs to vote on that, do we? No, okay.
The council will
signatures.
vote on the signers for that
Sure,
account. That is
sure.
that is on the agenda. Yeah.
Okay. And then I will discuss this later, but we took a vote to cut 2 additional expenses in the proposed budget, and I will talk about during the budget process. So I wanted to thank the members of the committee, Councilmember Measy and Councilmember Pestrak, and the staff, and Donna. I don't know that we've ever met 3 times to get a budget, but we did this year, and it was a lot of effort went into it. I think the result is a much better result, and but that will be it for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councilwoman Tyler.
Roy, you said, I'm sorry, Councilman Schaefer, you said that you, what was the audit company that you said?
I forget, it's the one we're using now.
Lindsay and Associates.
Right.
Lindsay?
Lindsay.
Oh,
with an L.
Yeah, and that's a 3-year contract. So, and just so, I mean, there might not be, everyone might not be aware of this. Our fiscal year, which is the year we use for accounting, it's a June 30th year, which means our financial year, for purposes of our budgets and our financial statements, it will start July 1st. So when I refer to the 2025 fiscal year, it will begin July 1st, 2024, and run through June 30th, 2025. Okay.
Okay.
I have one more question. So the budget, the draft that we have here is the one that the committee voted on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's a good point. We also, we voted to approve an updated draft of the budget, which is what was distributed.
That's in here.
Yeah.
Yes. in the
Okay.
packet.
Thank you.
It's also been on the website for a while.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then a report from the Ad Hoc Committee on Development. We met on April 25th. I'd like to thank the members of the committee for being present. This was a first meeting where we began to take a detailed look at the process that the county will use for the Friendship Heights sector plan. As of today, the county council has taken a straw vote, which includes the funds necessary to pay for the process of doing the sector plan for Friendship Heights. They still have another meeting coming up this week, at which they will take a final vote on their budget for next year. And I anticipate, having watched the council meeting and talked with a council member or two, that this item will stay in the budget, and that in fact we will begin a process sometime, likely in the early fall, to develop a new sector plan. On the table to your left, I believe there were several handouts, And the first is a page from the last adopted sector plan. And it's just to give you an idea of the iterative process that developing a sector plan like the one for Friendship Heights will involve. It does involve work by the planning staff themselves. It will involve presentations to communities like ours, but not exclusively ours. We are not, the village itself is not the only entity, geographic entity and municipal entity in the sector plan. It covers a much broader area. So there'll be presentations. We will, and have asked already for presentations here, and we've asked for participation in the process here in a number of different ways. Eventually, the planning board will review the plan, the sector plan, draft sector plan that the staff develop. If they approve it and don't have any major changes that need to be made, ultimately it will come to the county council and the county executive for their review, and then it will come back to the county council with a series of public hearings at which anybody who wishes to speak, and all of these meetings, both those of the planning board and of the county council, there are opportunities to speak publicly about what's being presented. I don't think that a copy was made of the schedule, which was in the county council's staff report for the budget, but I will ask the village manager to place that online. And you'll see that this sector plan process is going to take, if we count this week as the start, a little over 2 years. So we will be in 2026, likely in the late summer or early fall, before a final vote on the sector plan will take place by the county council. So this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we had, this of course was a public meeting of the development committee, and we had a number of people who attended the meeting, an interesting group of people, those who had participated in the process of the creation of the last sector plan, those who work in the private sector to consult on county processes like the sector plan, and people who worked formally within the county planning department to develop products like the sector plan. And this was what we hoped for in the first meeting, because these meetings are a process for beginning to get the development committee acclimated to the process of a sector plan and to understand what the process was like in the past, and if you will, to get ahead of the county's own sector plan process, so that when they start their process, we already have some understanding of how it will work, of the people we need to speak with, of the other people in the surrounding neighborhoods that we need to speak with, and be prepared for it. When one thinks about the village of Friendship Heights and looks at it presently, the village obviously has not always looked this way. It once was forested area on rolling hills. It became farmland. It was a collection of homes at the end of the trolley line coming out of D.C., and later it became homes like the Red House, and some that were larger as well. Some of us may be old enough to remember that there, at one point later, was a Howard Johnson's, where the metro stop is right now, and also that most of us are living in the high-rise buildings that are all around the village. So things change in the village over time, even though we see them at a particular moment. While the sector plan isn't a requirement, in other words, nobody has to follow it. There are all kinds of ways in which people can not follow what's been proposed. It's also not an abstract exercise. Businesses and developers and others, as well as county agencies, will look at what the sector plan says and will use it as a guide for the development in the village. We had a number of interesting recommendations come out of the people who participated in the Development Committee April 25th. And one was that it's very important to be working in a collegial fashion with the other groups and neighborhoods and jurisdictions around us, because we will be only one voice among a lot of voices, and one voice with priorities that may be very different than the priorities that are coming from other entities and organizations in the community. We should stay focused. We should, through our own auspices and working through the CCCFH, working collaboratively with neighborhoods around us, figure out what's important to us and what most high priority things are for us, because as only one voice, we won't get everything that we ask for, but if we are united asking for common things, we stand a greater chance of getting them. We were alerted to the fact that it's a policy document, not necessarily a legal document, and the number of meetings where we will have an opportunity, both individually and as a village and as part of the jurisdictions that surround us, have an opportunity to comment on it. We were advised that the planning board thematically feels an obligation to the future. They're looking into the future and feel a responsibility to figure out what the future should look like here. They're not necessarily concerned about the present. We learned that there needs to be a new form of analysis, a new type of analysis by the county planning department, which is an environmental analysis. What will development or different types of development mean for the environment within the general Friendship Heights sector plan area? And in that respect, the chair of the Climate Change and Environment Committee and I have set up some meetings to begin to, a meeting right now to begin to discuss how the work of that committee might be coordinated with the work of the Development Committee with respect to this new requirement. We had comments about preserving green space. If one looks at the results from the urban study that was done, we are a very unusual metropolitan area and jurisdictional area with much more green space than one finds in any of the other business districts. And so we were asked to pay attention to that, asked to pay attention to the effect of development on contamination of Little Falls Creek. And we were asked to consider whether it will likely be possible for small retail to survive within the community, given online shopping and much other shopping that is done elsewhere. We were asked to consider diversity development and to think about that as a term rather than balanced development because of the potentially negative connotation that balanced development had, and that diversity development might strike a different tone with different parts of our community and others. So with that, we have another development committee meeting scheduled. Julian, the date is?
May 29th.
May 29. That meeting will be announced also. It is a public meeting. And basically, there were recommendations at the Development Committee about additional speakers and presenters we might bring in to inform the Development Committee and other members of the public who are able to attend about the process itself. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councilman Mazer.
There was an excellent summary of the meeting, Bobby. I would like to recognize Al Muller, who was a participant at the meeting that we had. As many of you know, Al was present at the creation, so to say, but certainly at the creation of the sector plan, and it was a person who was intimately involved in the entire process. And I found it very useful to hear from Al, and I can't remember the other woman's name, who was Julie Davis from Somerset, who had also been involved in the process. And learning how they did the process last time and the type of approaches they took, I found to be particularly helpful. So I want to thank Al for his participation.
Thank you, Councilman Measy, for that addition. That moves us on into old business. We have an update from the council working group on prospective tenants for the Red House. And Councilman Ayer, I think you will do that update? Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, happy to do it. So I know the item is identified as an update from the council. I'm wondering if it would be permissible. I think we've got two potential points for decision. When the agenda was finalized, we hadn't had an opportunity to come together, but we did work over the weekend. And I think we can offer two outcomes if that's all right.
You may, go ahead.
So the first, over the last 2 weeks, the committee has met, and the committee and the village manager have met with 3 real estate attorneys. We engaged with both of our current council, who both sort of acknowledged that this work was outside of their scope of expertise, recommended other attorneys to help us work directly with the potential tenants to negotiate leases for this space. As I said, we met with the group met with 3 different attorneys, and I think has come to the conclusion that the attorney recommended to us by our current village council, her name is Beth Irving. She's a principal at Stein Sperling. Ron recommended her to us, and I think the consensus was that her presentation and her, both the substance of her presentation and the terms that she informally has offered were the most agreeable to the group. So what we'd like to suggest next is to have the village manager work with her to develop a letter of engagement. So we would see her specific expectations around the length of time, division of labor between her as the principal and her associates, and the billable hours for the 2 types of attorney.
Councilman Orr, would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I'd be happy to if everyone.
You may.
Go ahead, Charles.
One thing, just so that everyone knows, I don't know if you heard it, their expertise is in commercial real estate. And the group specifically looked at a commercial realtor. So it's not just a regular real estate attorney. They have a specialty in this background. And they also, as Daniel said, Councilman Ayer said, they've had experience when they were talking with us. They've had experience in working with tenants, landlords, bakeries, restaurants. So they have the background that we really wanted to hear about.
There's been a motion to recommend Beth Irving from Stein Sperling as an attorney to represent us in negotiations around the Red House.
Yes.
Is there support for that motion?
Second.
Supported by Councilwoman Salt. Is there discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Chairman, I'm asking for a
Yeah.
roll call vote on every vote, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can I proceed?
please proceed.
Okay. R?
Yes.
R4, Measy? Yes. Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Salt 4, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler 4, White
Yes.
4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk abstained, thank you.
And the second item we've been working on is structural changes to the building to accommodate any potential tenant. They come in 2 categories. The first is accessibility renovations. That's work mostly on the first floor and building access to include providing compliant ramp to enter the building, widening doorways, and making the first floor bathroom accessible. At least one of the proposed tenants has also asked for a widened doorway at the back of the building to accommodate restaurant-grade equipment. We conducted an informal survey, got some rough estimate numbers, and it looks like that additional work, the expansion of the doorway in the back of the building, will be about $50,000 or so, please correct me if my numbers are wrong, but about $50,000 or so in addition to some project somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $200,000, likely a little bit more. And so we recommend that since we'll be doing the permitting and the architectural work and a number of the foundational elements of the project already, since we'll need to do the accessibility renovations to have any tenant occupy the building, that we just complete the entire project as outlined in order to maximize flexibility for potential future tenants. The next step would be for the village to put out a RFP to get formal bids to do the construction work. So I'd move, Cheryl, go ahead. Yep.
Well, I heard some people kind of quirk when he said the doorway. So that you understand, it's not just a regular doorway. It is, in order for it to be a commercial kitchen, if any of you have been in the back and go down the steps, that stone wall that's on both sides of the staircase is what has to be shaved down. And that is to make it a commercial kitchen so that you can get the equipment. Because let's face it, those doors were built back in the early 1900s. So we did, as Daniel said, have Julian had a contractor that the village has worked with. Two of them came in to look at everything and have also offered the services of a architectural designer so that we know that that person also does structural engineering so that we know nothing will be messed up. So we're crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, and asking the questions. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood it's not just a regular doorway. It is widening that stone door.
Thank you. Councilman Orr, do I understand you'd like to make a motion to this
Yes.
effect?
So I'd like to make a motion for the village to develop an RFP for a construction project at the Red House to include accessibility accommodations and structural accommodations necessary to accommodate a commercial kitchen.
Is there, Councilman Easy? Thank you. Is there discussion on the motion? It's been made by Councilman R and seconded by Councilman Measy. And Councilman Salt, let me make sure that do you need more information in order to have the minutes? You got a question?
I think I have the motion. But I'm wondering if we want to put a dollar amount in the motion. It's a question.
My understanding is that we're authorizing an RFP.
Okay, you're right,
And-
you're right.
Okay.
I take it back, thank you.
Sure. No, good question. Thanks. Other questions?
Now, I'd
Yes.
just like to make a comment. This does not cover what a new tenant would have to do on their own. This is the basic structural work we would have to do to accommodate any tenant. Whoever we sign a lease with will have to come and do their own furnishings, maybe some carpentry, whatever. That is not included in this proposal.
Other questions or thoughts? So there's a motion on the floor. It's been supported with respect to having the village manager issue an RFP for various types of changes in the Red House to accommodate tenants. I call for the question. All those in favor, or say, Councilwoman Salt, would you like a roll call vote on this?
Please.
Please.
R?
Yes.
R4, Measy? Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Salt 4, Tyler? 4, White?
Yes.
4, Pastrunk?
Abstain.
Pastrunk abstain, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Orr?
And then just the last, and this is just an update, I will be taking over responsibility for sort of managing the administrative work of this committee, so I appreciate the work that the other members have been doing. We'll continue to work together with the village manager, but as both of the other members have leadership responsibilities and other kind of significant commitments to the council, I volunteered to, or was asked to take over kind of responsibility for managing the logistics and fielding questions. So if there are questions about the development, you can feel free to direct them to me.
Mayor White, would you like to make a motion on that?
Yes, I was going to make that recommendation, even though this is not a true village council, it's a working group. I'm certainly appreciative of the work that the council members have done on it, and I would make a motion to have Daniel R. be the chair of this working group.
Is there support for the motion to make Councilman R. the chair of this group? Thank you, Councilwoman Tyler. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in, Councilwoman Salt? Thank you. I'll get it.
And I'm going to call that the Red House Working Group.
Okay, yes.
R,
I'll abstain.
R abstain, Easy? Yes. Easy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4. Salt, me 4, Tyler? 4. Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, Pastrana?
Abstain.
Pastrana abstain, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman R., is there any other business?
Nope, that concludes my update.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the working group for their work over the past several weeks. Great work and great product to date. That moves us on to a discussion and vote on the approval of the fiscal year 2025 village budget. Councilman Schaefer?
Okay, thank you. So now, if we can put up, please, this is a slide for the proposed budget. So I want to start by saying, I got some feedback after the last meeting, and comments were made that I didn't necessarily respond to because I thought they were comments. I was told I should have really taken them more as questions, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. And also, I didn't acknowledge the people on live stream, which greatly exceeds the number of people here. I passed out some slides. I didn't have copies available. So that's why we have the slides up here. So I just like quickly to go through our budget, how we format it. It gave me a clicker. Is that, oh, there we go. So, I have to hold it. So yeah, so we have it's pretty straightforward. We have a revenue section. This last column is the budget. If we scroll down, we have what, and the revenue, let me just say quickly, by revenue, we mean things that generally are recurring. So most of that is their taxes, their receipts from the county, it's the ticket revenue, maybe renting out the house, things that, occur regularly. What we don't include in revenue are things that are like sales. So when we receive the money from the air rights, that will never appear in our revenue. It's not in our budget because it's quite frankly not a revenue item. It's just money we get for selling an asset. If you go down a little more, then we just have our general expenses. And these are our operating expenses, which are the day-to-day things we spend money on: the police patrol, the shuttle, salaries, utilities. Again, the things that are more or less known, that are regular, that recur. We have them in categories. And then we come down to, at the bottom, we have a surplus. And if you look at the right column, that's what we're projecting, is a surplus of $138. But this, we'll talk about that in a minute. But this only represents a surplus looking at our operating expenses. There's a whole nother category of expenses. The $27,000 we approved last month for the HVAC system. The $17,000 we approved for speed bumps, I think, in January. The $100,000 or so we've already spent on the Red House. The $150 or so or more we might spend going forward to get it ready. When I talk about capital expenses, these are the expenses that I'm talking about. They're not regular, but they're recurring. We have them. Unfortunately, we don't ever include them in our budget. We don't tell you what they are, what they will cost. We don't tell you where the money will come from. They're just not part of our budget, and I think it makes our budget incomplete and somewhat misleading. And I wanted to give you an example of something that's better. And that's why I pulled, and this comes right off their website, I went to the town of Cherry Chase, and I pulled their budget, if we can see that. Okay, now that's, can we make it bigger, or, but, And the numbers themselves don't really matter. If you, and this is also their fiscal year 25 budget, if you look at the right side. And this is their summary page. They have about 8 pages of detail following this. You'll see the general revenue, which is similar to us. You'll see the next section, the operating expenses, which are similar to what we do. But then if we scroll down, they include their capital expenses. They estimate them for the coming year. They tell you what they are. And then they have a green line, total capital expenditures, because that's money that you need to account for, it's money you need to have, and it's money you need to just be honest about and say you're spending this money, you need to have it available. And when they give their surplus, it's after, if you see the line total operating and capital expenditures, which is right here, it's both. It's the sum of the operating and the sum of the capital expenditures. So when they give their surplus, it's really after accounting for everything they're going to spend. We don't do that. And that's unusual, because if you look at the budget for the town of Somerset, it looks very similar to this budget. So the next question is where does the money come from for our capital expenses? Since we clearly don't have a surplus from our operating income and expenses, the capital expenses come from our savings. And they come right out of our savings, but we don't, as I said, have a schedule, know what they are, plan them in advance. But obviously we're spending that money, which brings me to a comment of I hear all the time, which is we have plenty of money. That might be true in the very short term, the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Longer term, we're on a path that's not sustainable. And these are the 2022 financial statements. At June 30th, 2022, we had $7.3 million in the bank. Now we have about 3.1. Most of that money was spent on Page Park, it was spent on the Red House, but not all of it. The difference that those expenses don't account for are capital expenses. And people, because of the way we present our budget, people really don't see it getting spent. Now, I'm really happy that the council this year has established a capital fund, which will reserve money, but again, it's just moving one money into a reserve fund so it's available. It doesn't create the additional revenue we are going to need long-term to cover capital expenses. And I updated a spreadsheet I did last month for the current budget, if we could bring that up. And we're going to vote later to put $500,000 from the air rights into this fund. We'll start at $1.5 million. This is what happens if we don't. There's a line here, annual contribution. If we don't feed this fund, if we don't put money into this fund, it eventually will run to zero. 10 years may seem like a long time. For a government, it's not. This is not meant to be a retirement fund. In 10 years, we'll still be operating, hopefully. These numbers are also probably...
Excuse me, can you make that bigger? I can't see anything, so, or show.
Yeah, so I put $1.5 million. Again, this isn't professionally done. These are sort of my back of the envelope, but I did get input from staff. I did send this to the council several days ago, so they've had a copy of it. The numbers are probably also pretty low because our infrastructure is aging, as you might imagine. The buildings we own are aging, our parks are aging. Going forward, will have 2 new major assets to maintain, not just the construction of Page Park, but the maintenance of it and the maintenance of the Red House. So what I'm estimating for 10 years probably would be earlier than that. So I think of this account sort of like a tank of gas. You could drive a while on it, but if you don't make annual contributions, if you don't put money into it, it goes to zero. And that's why we need to have in our budget and recognize it as an expense to move money into this account. But as I said earlier, for this year, we took it out in exchange for adding money to it. And I think That's most, oh, okay. And that, we can take that down. And that leads me to the last vote we took at the Finance Committee meeting. After we took out the capital expense line, we took a vote to reduce 2 line items. We reduced the snow budget by $15,000. We reduced the new initiatives budget, which is a new expense, by $1,000. And that, after those changes, we have that surplus of $180. But again, that does not cover any expenses for our parks, for our roads, for our buildings, which obviously we're going to have to continue to spend money on, and that will increase. So, and then I wanted to show one more thing. And this is sort of and I passed this out last week as well. I updated it for the new budget. Can we go to that line graph? And I know this is a lot. It's a lot for a meeting. I can't take questions, unfortunately, but if any of you would like to meet with me anytime, I'm happy to do that. So the first 4 columns here, they're actual. I just took these right from the financial statements. This is the current year budget. In 2021, the expenses dropped. I'm sorry, the top line is revenue, the bottom line is expenses. So in 2021, this was basically due to COVID. The cost increased dramatically in 22 and 23. Aside from just regular operating increases, a lot of this was due to legal costs we had related to the building on Wisconsin Avenue. I think we spent about $250,000 over a couple of years on that. Towards the end of 2023, that's when the police patrol kicked in. I think we spent about $40,000 that year. And in the current year budget, it's the first time we budgeted a whole year of the police patrol. That's $175,000. This line here would have been steeper, except our legal expenses started to drop, but obviously they've continued to go up. This is our current budget. Most of the increase is due to salaries. We didn't increase salaries a lot, but they were under budgeted in the current year, so we had to catch up that number to the actual amount. We also increased we have the election next year, which is an expense we don't have this year. We had probably a $20,000 or so increase to the parking contract. So, and that sort of leads me to, if you wanted to extend this out, I don't think you need to be a math major to see what's going to happen. I believe our revenue is going to continue to stay flat. That's just based on what I've seen and what I've read. I don't expect any increase there. But our expenses are going to obviously continue to increase. Most of them are just tied to things, a lot of them out of our control. Our biggest expense is salaries, which will go up. And to get back to the idea of we have a lot of money, not only are we going to be spending our capital expenses from savings, but if that trend does continue, we're going to be funding our deficits from savings unless we make some sort of structural change. And so with that, I'll move that we, and the budget was adopted unanimously at the Finance Committee meeting. So I will move, and thank you for your patience, I will move to adopt that budget.
Is there support for that motion? Councilwoman Tyler, thank you. And then questions about the motion and the presentation, or the presentation.
Councilman Schaefer, I had wanted to ask for clarity. You said that there was expenditures on the Red House. If you can elaborate, 1, what those expenditures were, and then 2, if the Red House is rented, then will that rent be able to sustain whatever maintenance and upkeep we will have to do on the house?
Okay, well, the first question is, I mean, Julian, we when we bought the house, it was in a pretty bad state of repair or disrepair. We put money into cameras, the flooring. You know more than I do about that.
We had a house inspection at the time of the purchase, and there were a number of deficiencies, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, security, sprinklers. So we went through the list and finished everything up on that list that was identified as a deficiency. So that was certainly a capital improvements expense on top of the cost of the house itself, and that was 2 years ago. So,
So
FY 2023, we did those expenses.
So none of the, and I'm asking this not to say you did something wrong. I want to understand, so when we bought the house, it wasn't negotiated that they needed to make some improvements for it or reduce the price of what we paid
No,
for it?
We bought it as is, right?
We bought it as is.
It was sold as is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then the second part of the question,
If I could just add some, and even since then, we've had ongoing expenses. I think last month there was like a fence bill for $7 or $8 grand at the Red House.
Yes.
Yeah,
that
so
was,
it wasn't like we came in, did a bunch of work, and we're done.
Right.
These have continued. And again, these are completely separate from what we'll have to do to rent the house. To answer your second question, you know, hopefully, first of all, we're, as you know, we're many months off from renting that house. We need the RFP, we need to do the repairs, we need to get a tenant. Our real estate attorney said even once we agree on terms, it's, I think she said 45 days to 5 months to get a lease signed. And I was glad she said that because I know it's not a fast process. So we are a long ways away from even having money. And then the cost to upkeep the house, a lot of it depends on the lease and what the owners are responsible for, what we're responsible for. And that still remains to be seen.
so that's my question. Do you think what we're charging them based on the recommendation to us of the rate, will that fee coming in help offset some of the expenses that we may agree to take on?
Oh, absolutely, because it's revenue we don't have. But but the other question is when you start renting it, especially for a retail high traffic operation, your costs, we will incur costs we would not have incurred just having the house sit empty. So it's really hard to make that kind of prediction. But to answer your question, yes, it should hopefully be a net positive.
Yes, Councilwoman Salt.
Roy, you said something that I didn't understand, and I think it relates to the Finance Committee meeting. You were talking about some funds. You said you took it out in exchange for adding it. Could you
sorry.
clarify what, I just
No,
don't
and
understand what you mean.
No, and thank you for asking, because if you didn't get it. So in the draft we presented last month, there was a dedicated line for capital expenses, and it's money that was going to go into that capital fund, or as in the analogy I used, sort of gas to keep the tank full. We took that line out partly in an effort to get a balanced budget that was important for people, and in exchange for sort of letting go to that $25,000 contribution, the Finance Committee unanimously recommended we will put $500,000 from the air rights. So we're to complete that analogy, we'll be starting out with a bigger tank of gas. Yeah.
And I have two more questions.
Go ahead.
One is about the budget summary from the town of Chevy Chase, and I've seen something along these lines at some other municipalities. This, to me, looks like a much more sophisticated form of, I guess, financial reporting. I'm wondering, can we move toward this? Do you see that as realistic?
Yeah, and I would like to, but, you know, and I think we've taken a big step now by at least, well, not this year, but maybe going forward, to put money into the fund by establishing the fund, by recognizing that we can't just pay these expenses like whack-a-mole. We get the bill and we pay it. So, but yeah, longer term, absolutely. We should have a more complete presentation.
And I'm guessing there's no way we can get cable TV revenue just like Chevy Chase does, right?
I don't know about that, but, you know, maybe we can cut a deal.
Village Manager Mansfield?
Yeah, I do know about that. We are not eligible.
It is a joke,
because,
okay, yeah.
No, just to clarify, we're not eligible as a non-municipality. Special tax districts do not get cable franchise revenue. That was a big battle, but we did not be able to get that. Only if we become a municipality.
And if I can say, there are buildings in the community that do get revenue the landlords 4615, and potentially down the line, the Willard will be the same way, because the landlords are charging the people for internet use. Not supplying it, but use.
Yeah, and I am seeing that more in the buildings I underwrite. They're providing a cable package, and sometimes it's not optional. And because it's not optional, they say this is income to the building. So, but that's a separate
question. Councilman Mazie?
Yeah, I appreciate Roy's work on this, and as I said before, and certainly will support the budget. When Roy presents, as we've always seen these things, you know, revenue flattening out, expenses going up, and panic sets in. I do want to point out a few things, though. We turn necessarily in that situation almost instinctively to, you know, what can we cut? How can we reduce expenditures in order to make sure that our budget is balanced? Well, the things that drive our expenditures are things that the community wants, or at least significant chunks of the community want. The biggest ones, aside from our staff expenditures, are the police presence, the shuttle bus, now, of course, the Red House, which presumably will become an amenity for the community once it's rented out. So we are spending money for the community. Well, if we are doing that, one of the things that we might consider is to raise taxes. I know that's not something everybody wants to hear, but we do tax at the lowest allowable rate at this that the state allows us to do. We've always had that in our budget. But if we want to have all the amenities that people seem to want in the community, well, we need to pay for those things. And you pay for those things by raising the rates if you need to do that. The second point beyond that is that Roy's calculations don't take into consideration the building of 5500 Wisconsin, in which we have a significant number of new residents moving into the community who will be paying taxes and will increase our revenue through the tax rates at that point. Secondly, the property tax on that building will go up significantly once it's occupied and in use, as opposed to it being essentially vacant at this point. So, you know, I want to be fiscally responsible. I will never use the term fiscally conservative. I want to be fiscally responsible, but we also need to be understand that we do have sources of revenue, and the residents will have to make some decisions. If you want the various services that we provide, we should pay for them. And many of our services really affect relatively small numbers of people. And the shuttle bus affects only a small number of people, but those people depend upon it. It's important to them, and so we're not going to cut the shuttle bus. It seems that there are people who think that having a police car around is important. $175,000. That's you know, if you want that, you got to pay for that as well. So let's keep that in mind as we go through the next budget cycle and try to plan for our capital expenses and try to plan for our regular expenses that we do. We're not going to be standing on the corner with a tin cup. We have ways of generating money, and I think the onus falls on the taxpayers in many respects to say, if you want these things, pay for them. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see, any other questions? Councilman Orr or Councilwoman Salt?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay. Councilman Orr? No? Mayor White? I know, I wanted to see whether anybody else had a comment before. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Mizzi's comments. I did just want to respond to one of them, which is the additional revenue. We're at least, I'd say, 4 to 5 years away from getting any money from that building. They don't even have a start date to build it. So once we get a start date,
But your spreadsheet has us running out of money 10 years from now, so.
No, it's that fun. No, but I'm just to give some, because I've heard people say that, oh, we're getting this money. So I don't know when they'll start. I haven't seen a market study lately for this area, but once we start, 2 years to build the building, 2 years to lease up the building, then they start filing tax returns, then the money comes back. So we're not, this council will not see any of that money. The one after us will not see it, maybe the one after us. So that's not anything anybody should consider imminent.
Are there any other questions? There is a motion and support to approve the fiscal year 25 village budget. Councilwoman Solt?
R?
Yes.
R4, Measy?
Yes.
R4, Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Solt 4, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, Pastrunk?
Abstain.
Abstain, thank you.
Thank you. That moves us on to an update on the Page Park permit application. Councilman Measy?
All right, what you've all been waiting for. The Page Park project crawls along with one step forward, one step backward. There are two issues that need to be resolved before the final packet of information can be submitted to the county. The first has to do with the handrails that need to be installed on the steps at the west end of the park and on the ramp at the east end of the park. At the request of our structural engineer, the iron fabricator who will produce the handrails has revised his drawings, and these revisions are now in the engineer's hands. He should be able to sign off on those within the next few days. So that will be, that, again, I never try not to make definitive statements about Page Park, but that should happen pretty quickly. However, it is still an open question about when the handrails will be delivered, how long it will take for them to be installed, and whether or not the park can be open once the specs for the handrails are approved. As everyone knows, the ramp at the east end of the park is in fact open with the county's approval, but without the handrails. And so it may well be that, that we can, I'm not promising anything, but it may be possible to open the park, without completing the handrail process or while the handrails are in process. The second issue has to do with whether or not a ramp leading up to the pergola area is necessary. One member of the county team that we have been dealing with had indicated that the ramp would not be required if the contractor could show that 20% or more of the project's total costs are already being spent providing access elements to the park. More than 20% of the funds have been spent for this purpose, so our understanding until very recently was that we had met this requirement. However, late last week, another member of the county team told us that a ramp would be required. We were telephoning and emailing this morning, attempting to reconcile these two views from the county, and not surprisingly to those of you who have dealt with bureaucracies, we've not been called back, although we've had a brief email exchange late in the day. Should such a ramp be required, we will encounter another significant delay. When and if these issues are resolved, the county will do a final inspection of the park with our structural engineer present. The inspection is the last step in opening the park, so it would not have occurred now at this point. It would occur only when all the information is in and when the county has given approval in terms of all the permit stuff that has gone in. Then they would do the final inspection. So let me summarize this less than optimistic status report. At this point, I cannot provide an estimated date for the taking down of the ugly orange fence and the opening of the park. We continue to be frustrated by the communication lapses and unreasonable delays among the several parties involved here. the contractor, the subcontractors involved with the railings, our structural engineer, and the various people involved at the county, some of whom have given us and our contractor conflicting and in some cases inappropriate and/or incorrect information. Should we be unable to resolve the ramp issue, we will work to set up a face-to-face meeting involving our contractor, our staff, council members, and members of the permitting operation, and see if we can finally force this to some sort of conclusions. I want to add that Julian and Jason have been working on the phones on a daily, sometimes hourly basis in an attempt to move things forward. We continue to be displeased, to say the least, with our contractor. We still retain a significant portion of the contracted amount for the project, and of course, none of those dollars will be released until the park opens. We will continue to keep the community informed as we hopefully move forward. Be assured that the council and the staff view the conclusion of this project and the opening of the park as our highest priority. That's where we are now.
Thank you, Councilman Veazey. Are there any questions from council? Councilwoman Sol?
Is it correct, I mean, I've read so many things over so many months, if you could answer, is it correct that Page Park was never originally designed to be handicapped accessible in all aspects of it? The children's area and the pergola and so forth, was that the original design, not to be handicapped accessible?
Julian, do you recall? I don't think it was in the original plan.
I'm sorry, could you repeat what you said?
I don't believe it was in the original plan.
So the original plan was not designed to be handicapped accessible, is that right?
No, I don't believe that's correct. No, the original plan was to dramatically increase accessibility.
I think are you referring to all areas of the?
Yeah,
Yeah, the pergola, the children's area.
Oh, those sorts of things are, well, children's, go ahead, I'm sorry, Julie.
If you're referring to the park as a whole, the plan absolutely was to increase accessibility. The original park was completely inaccessible. Every single pathway in and out would not have met ADA requirement due to the topography. I mean, it was a very steep slope from the sidewalk on North Park to get up into the park. So it was dramatically regraded by the contractor to provide that initial pathway that would be accessible, and then the entire patio area was also regraded to make that a flat surface and completely accessible. Plus the sort of circumference, the new path that circles the entire park, which was not there previously, was also absolutely designed to be level and accessible. So I would say for sure that was a main goal of the renovation, was to increase accessibility where there really had been none before.
Let me add something to that. My first response was the handrail business, and that the handrail business, I think we weren't sure about where the handrails would have to be and so on. But certainly, I want to emphasize Julian's point, and one of the reasons that many of us supported the new park design was you couldn't get into the park if you had mobility problems. There was just no way to do that. And now the park is completely, and that's why in terms of the ramp and the pergola ramp, that's why we were told that we would not have to do that ramp because we had spent a huge amount of our funds making the park accessible, more accessible than it had been before.
Okay, could I just say how I'm understanding what you said? That the construction in Page Park made it more accessible than it was before, but the goal of the construction was not to make it fully accessible. Is that what you're saying? That's a lot. I'm just trying to understand.
Can I rephrase it? I
think
no.
Mr. Dorsey, please. Mr. Dorsey, please.
If I could, can I attempt to read? I think the question is the pergola now and the player area now how it was designed? which is non-accessible. Those two sections of it.
That's not true. Yeah.
No, I'm asking, was that the original, what we have now, is it the original design?
Yes.
Which means that pit is not accessible, so that was the design, that you can't get into it.
The play,
But there was a subsequent discussion to put a ramp into it.
But there
So-
isn't one.
Right.
And
but
that
there-
was the
but
design,
there was a
did not-
plan discussed to do it.
Okay, and
yeah.
there was never a plan to put a ramp into the children's play area.
I thought that's what you're referring to.
I'm referring to both, the pergola pit and the playground. You can't get into those areas are not accessible.
Correct.
So is that how the park was designed?
Correct.
Okay, so it's my understanding that when you sort of have like a blank canvas, undeveloped land, everything has to be accessible, because it's an easy thing to incorporate into the design. This is different from what I'm hearing about the 20%, but I've always understood that, no, unless there's an exception, which is really hard when you're starting from scratch, everything needs to be accessible. And in fact, I spoke to someone today, and they said not only does the children's area need to be accessible, but even the equipment you put in there, like the swings, might need to be accessible, because what's the point of having an accessible playground if the people who need the ramp can't
Roy,
use
it's a
it when
small
we're there?
area, there aren't
No,
going
I
to be
know,
swings in there.
but it's my understanding that it has to be 100%.
So here's, Councilman Measy, let me try and help out here. I think part of what's clear is the process, the permitting process to begin the park. We all know that wasn't followed as it should have been. And it's likely that had it been followed, some of the original design might have been modified to respond to requirements that we're now discovering. We know that. I think, as Councilman Measy has explained, we are attempting to reach a final understanding with the Department of Permitting Services about what the requirements are, and to find out what will be required by way of handrails and ramps and the allowable and necessary accessibility to the park. And my hope would be that we'll have a much better understanding of that at the next meeting. And we had talked and had public comment about Page Park in the past on a number of different occasions to do some kind of after-action report to understand how the Page Park, how we ended up with orange fences at Page Park. And we're actually learning some of those lessons as Councilman R. and Councilwoman Tyler have described with respect to the future development of the Red House. But there likely are other lessons to be learned as well. So if we can, rather than continuing discussion about what happened in the past, maybe it would be productive to focus on the future, and hopefully by our next council meeting, we'll have a better understanding of what we need to do on many of these questions, accessibility being one of them. So let me see if there are any other questions from council members. Councilman R.
Just one observation for our consideration going forward. I think a number of the prospective issues we're discussing are knowable. There are, our discussions about percentage of budget or permitting requirements, legal requirements. And so I think we will get answers, and I think Mr. Measy has been doing a really good job of capturing those questions and pressing to get the answers. I do want to just note for consideration between now and the time we get together, we may find that that our answers fall into three buckets: not necessary, legally required, and this third bucket of best practice or preferred. And I think that will fall on us then to think and discuss a little bit our sort of philosophical approach as a community organization to questions of accessibility on a number of fronts. So I think we just need to be prepared that some of these answers may not be black and white, and we'll need to decide to what extent we're prepared to either adopt or reject some of those best practices. You know,
Fair enough.
recognizing there are price tags to accommodation, but there's also sort of larger community elements to not making those choices.
Other comments? Yes,
I have one more
Councilman
question.
Schaefer.
For Councilmember Measy, if you know, once we get the approval for the railings, do you know how long it will take to
No.
fabricate those?
No.
Okay.
Mayor White, I think among the council members, you're the only one who has not an opportunity to ask a question. Do you have any? No? Okay. Well, thank you then, Councilman Measy, for your report and update on Page Park. That moves us to a discussion vote on the recommendation to transfer $500,000 to the Capital Improvement Fund. Councilman Schaefer has described this already, but would you like to make a
Yeah,
motion?
as I mentioned, this is not something we're doing now. This is when we get the money from the air rights, we are going to transfer 500,000 of that into our capital fund. And again, this was unanimously approved by the Finance Committee.
Would you like to make a motion to that regard?
Okay, so I make a motion that when we receive the $1 million from sale of the air rights, 500,000 will be transferred to our capital fund account.
Is there support for that motion? Councilman R. Are there questions? Yes, Councilwoman Tyler.
Okay, this is out of the blue. What are you gonna do with the other 500,000?
That's up to the that's up to the council, but I'll be happy to take on that responsibility.
I mean, we've made a definitive statement that we're gonna put 500,000 into
Right.
the capital, but we haven't said anything. So the finance committee is gonna think about recommending what to do with that.
I don't know if that's our purview, but I'd be happy to, like I said, I'd be
Okay.
happy to take that on.
I would suggest that we all kind of figure out that the finance committee may want to think about what to do with
Okay.
the other 500.
Okay.
There's any other questions on the motion, which is to transfer $500,000 to the Capital Improvement Fund from the $1 million anticipated payment from the developer when that money comes in? Councilwoman Salt?
R?
Yes.
R4, Measy?
Yes.
Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Sold 4, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler 4, White
Yes.
4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk abstain, thank you.
That takes us to the discussion vote on the interior plant maintenance contract proposals. Village Manager Mansfield?
Yes, we did advertise for bids for the interior plant maintenance contract, and we received 6 proposals, including one from our incumbent, and we asked for 3-year pricing. This was competitively bid, and as usual, we had the range of bids from low to high. The incumbent is Interior Garden Designs, who's been doing great work for us for many years. And they are the second lowest bid. They are nearly the lowest bid. And they've kept their price the same. They're currently charging us $550 a month, and they're proposing to keep that the same for the next 3 years. So staff is recommending that we continue with Interior Garden Designs.
It was 500, right? They went up to 550. The old contract was 500.
It's $550 now.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah, it had been $525, and it went up to $550. But
It was-
currently, it's $550, and they're just going to keep it
Okay.
that for 3 years. Yes.
So for purposes of the discussion, is there a motion to approve the contract with Interior Garden Designs as recommended? Councilwoman Tyler, motion, is there support? Councilman R, thank you. Is there discussion about the motion? Thank you. Councilwoman Salt?
I know the council decided that it wants a plant maintenance contract. That was decided at a prior meeting. I really think consideration should be given to the lowest cost proposal. They offer services by an experienced team of plant professionals. They're a locally owned, family-owned business that's less than a mile away. They've been in the area since 1942. The proximity allows for immediate service if there's an issue and supports a local business establishment. in their proposal, they identified 24 specific plants in the building and identified individualized care. There's a team approach, so it doesn't rely on just one person who may become injured or ill. So I really support the bid from York Flowers.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stoll. Are there any additional comments on the motion that's been made? Seeing none, call for the vote. Councilwoman Stoll?
Yes.
Oh, R, I have to call you first, sorry. R, for R, Measy?
Yes.
Yes, for Measy. Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer, yes. Sold, against. Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, yes. White?
Yes.
Yes. Pestrunk?
Abstain. The
Pestrunk
vote is
abstain.
Councilwoman Stoll, then in terms of numbers, 5 to 1,
5 to 1 and 1 abstain.
and 1 abstain.
Yep.
Right, all right, thank you. The motion carries. That moves us on to the report from the Council Shuttle Bus Committee on Bus Proposals. Mayor White?
Thank you. The committee has been looking at a series of buses. We took a look at 4. One was through Zoom because there was no local bus available for us to take a look at in person. Out of the 4 buses, I think we have eliminated 2, primarily because of the ramp that is so important for our community. The one bus, the ramp, I felt like we had been taken back about 20 years. The bus was that antiquated. The second bus rather, the ramp was semi-automatic. It had to be engaged by the driver. And the reason that they showed us that model was they said that the ramp would be less likely to break down than a fully automatic model. But we explained to the company that that's just not a good use of the driver's time to have to be hopping up and down for every stop. So I think we've eliminated 2 of the buses that we saw. And when you look at the smaller buses with the smaller number of seats, it's important, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, it's important to remember that 1 person equals 2 seats on the bus, because people do not want to share a seat when their arms are full of groceries. They want to put their groceries next to them, and that's just the way it is. So when we are looking at these smaller buses, it's important to remember that if that bus has 12 seats, you're probably going to accommodate 6 people. The one company that could not provide a bus for us to examine except over Zoom has said that if it comes down to that company being seriously considered, that they would fly some staff or council members, some combination of us, out to Elkhart, Indiana to look at the bus itself, so at their expense.
Second prize is 2 weeks in Elkhart.
And finally, we will be meeting at some point in June, the committee. It's certainly a public meeting to discuss what we've seen so far and what are the must-haves as far as our shuttle bus. And so, as I said, that'll be sometime in June.
Thank you, Mayor White. Questions for Mayor White from council? None. Move us on to new business, which is, yes, go ahead, Councilman Schaefer.
Mayor White, if you know, what are the costs of the 2 that we're down to now, if you remember?
The costs of
The
the
annual
one
cost.
is RMA, and the other company was Atlantic.
And do you remember what their bids were?
I do not. Julian, do you
Okay.
remember?
There's actually quite a difference between those 2. Atlantic was, I believe, the low bidder, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000. And RMA was one of the higher bidders, and I think it was 460, 470, something like that. So either one would be
Okay,
definitely a reduction from the current cost, but Atlantic was quite a bit less.
okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Mayor White? Seeing none, moves us into new business and a discussion vote on the trash removal contract. Village Manager Mansfield?
So we were advised by Attorney Ron Bolt that for the service contracts we have, they should not be automatically renewed without some type of term. And this was I think one of the last remaining contracts we've had that was automatically renewed. So we did advertise for bids with a 3-year term for 3-year pricing for this contract. And I just want to explain that this contract is only for the trash cans out in the public areas. It does not obviously cover anything in each individual building's trash removal. So we have 16 trash cans total in the 3 parks, and we have 3 trash cans on North Park Avenue, and we have a few containers here at the Village Center and a couple of recycling bins. So this is the contract to empty all of those 6 days a week, every day except Sunday. And we did advertise for bids. The incumbent is Trash Away, and we have been pleased with their work. They've been very reliable. They have, and they're pretty much the low bid or pretty close to the low bid. Their bid includes, the base price does not include a few extra charges for fuel, so it's basically about $1,500 is what we're paying them now. But their 3-year pricing includes some increases. Starts at $1,381 and ends at $1,523, plus some additional charges for fuel. But they still are one of the lower bids, and you can see that we got some considerably higher bids. So staff is recommending continuing with Trash Away.
Are there questions for Village Manager Mansfield?
I'd actually like to make a motion, since we are already going month to month with Trash Away, and this is to replace a continuing relationship with a term-limited relationship. I'd like to make a motion to actually table this discussion till our next meeting. I spent some time with the individual proposals, and I had a hard time kind of comparing services and costs to make an informed decision. So I was hoping we could spend a little bit more time with the individual proposals and the roll-up before we vote. I don't know if others had the same problem, but
Might I suggest that we describe that as referring consideration of this to our
Absolutely.
next council meeting?
sure.
Okay.
I couldn't hear what you said, please.
I said
Referring?
referring it for consideration at the June council meeting. Is there any objection to that? Okay.
No.
Seeing,
I
Councilman Shea.
want to make a comment.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, and that's, I reflect that frustration, because looking at the bids, the Trash Away payments now they're $1,521, so which would make it the 3rd lowest. And the 1 and the 2, the Casella and the Sage, did not have surcharges. The Trash Away also said, I think it was the greater of 5% or CPI, which basically means it could go much higher than what they're proposing. And I think that's causing some of the confusion. We really don't know, since they're not actually capping their bid, what we would end up paying them.
Thank you. So this item will be moved to the June council meeting for consideration. Councilwoman Salt?
I have a comment concerning the little spreadsheet that comes in our packet. It would be really helpful if we make sure it's apples and apples, the total cost versus the total cost. So for Trash Away, I would have preferred to have included those, the fuel fee and the environmental surcharge in the base price. And if there were any other surcharges, which I don't think there were for the others, to include them so it's a full cost to full cost comparison. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or suggestions? This item then will be referred to the June council meeting. Moves us to a discussion vote on the security parking enforcement contract proposals. Village Manager Mansfield?
Actually, on this one, we are recommending a change. We have gone out for bid for the parking enforcement contract with security vendors. We did receive 10 proposals, including one from the incumbent Securitas. We do have in place a one-year contract with Securitas, which the council approved earlier this year as sort of a placeholder while we went out for bids. And as we've discussed before, we've had a lot of frustration with this company, specifically with their lack of support for the on-site guard, Monica Milton, who has been sort of the bread and butter. She's the only guard here. She does all the work of park enforcement day in, day out. Very difficult job. Occasionally takes abusive behavior and produces a pretty good amount of revenue for the village with parking tickets, which actually more than pays for this entire contract. But the company has really failed to support her and to provide backup personnel specifically when she is out. She does have entitled annual leave, sick days, and we've had numerous examples of untrained or lack of trained officers here on site when Monica is out, which results in nobody being here. And we obviously lose ticket revenue, but we also just lose the general enforcement and the security that she provides. Despite repeated attempts by staff to emphasize the need for this, they have failed over and over again to provide this type of backup support and trained personnel. So we are at the point where we would like to see a change. Jason and I interviewed several of these vendors, and we really like the proposal from Team Signal, which is actually a little bit less than what Securitas is proposing, so it would actually be a little bit of a reduction in our costs. For a 3-year period, they're starting at $34 an hour as a billing rate and going up slightly from that for the 3 years. And they would be able to take Monica. She would effectively just stay here and switch to this new company. They also described in detail how they do training of backup personnel, which has been lacking. Monica has been asked to do all the training for all of the backup guards that Securitas has sent here, despite our emphasizing that they should have a different system where they have training people to do the training and not rely on the on-site person. This new company would do it that way, which would be much preferable as well. So we're recommending a switch to Team Signal.
Village manager's recommendation is to move to Team Signal. Discussion, or is there a motion? Councilwoman Tyler.
Some of these companies I am familiar with, not familiar with Team Signal. But I'll tell you, just in my own experience, if they're charging us $34, the person's probably getting less than 18.
The pay rate to the guard is $20 an hour. That was set with every vendor as part of the RFP. That was required because that's her current pay rate. We didn't want her to get a
So they're
decrease.
paying 20.
So every one of these proposals is based on a $20 an hour guard payment.
And does that 20 include their insurance, their uniform, or is that deducted from their 20? And I only bring this up because the guard world is a very cheap world. And the people that they hire, they typically don't pay them a lot because they end up taking back the insurance, the uniforms, and they end up between, if they say 20, then they end up between 15 to 17.
The 20 is the take-home pay, and the billing rate of, it would be 34 for Team Signal, which is a little bit less. Securitas is right now
Well, I'm not a fan.
a little bit higher than that, but it's in range. But that's the billing rate encompasses insurance, paid leave, uniforms, and basically everything that would be the overhead on top of the pay rate to the guard.
Okay.
Councilman R.
I noticed one, you were noting the 34 for Team Signal. I noticed one distinction among these proposals. Some appear in the listed rate to include additional costs, so that this rate is a total monthly cost. The Team Signal rate at $34 seemed to exclude an additional vehicle cost that would bring the hourly rate closer to 40 for Team Signal. Am I reading that correctly? That was the hourly personnel cost, and then I think it was a weekly or maybe monthly vehicle rate on top of that I think
Right.
prorated hourly gets us closer to 40, which puts them near the top of the list of bidders rather than at the bottom, and several dollars more than we're paying for Securitas.
And, well, Securitas currently is 40 plus. Securitas right now is 40, and plus, yeah, including the vehicle.
Yeah.
So it would be comparable to that, but some of the other vendors as well had extra charges for the
Yeah.
vehicle. Yeah.
So I want to note that if we're looking at value, that Team Signal price is actually several dollars an hour more total than what's reflected here for us at 34.
Councilwoman Salt?
You note in this, the memo to us on Friday, that you believe that Team Signal would hire Monica. How did you learn that?
We discussed it during our interview with them. That's a very common practice, and they indicated, yeah, they'd be, in fact, they expressed a preference for that arrangement with every one of their clients. They prefer to have somebody on site that is already well regarded, that they can just simply pick up, as opposed to having to present a new person.
Did you discuss it with every other vendor that you interviewed?
Yes.
And if I could make a third comment, the same as what I said before, the spreadsheet is not apples and apples. So the tactical security solutions, that $33.50 includes a vehicle. So it's significantly less expensive than these other, as I read it, than these other vendors. But without having an apples and apples comparison, it's kind of difficult to read your chart, and we have to go back and look at the underlying bid to see if this is the total. So I would suggest going forward that we make sure it's an apples and apples comparison. If you know what I mean by apples and apples, like an all-in cost or whatever the metric is, it's the same for each of the vendors.
Councilwoman Salt, just so that I understand, are you suggesting that before a decision is made on this contract, that we have that kind of data, or?
That, in my mind, that would be ideal and probably necessary, but I've already done the adjustments myself, but obviously the rest of the council members don't have access to my adjusted spreadsheet, so.
Let me just ask one other question in
sure.
light of that. What's the nature of our current contract with Securitas? Is it month to month, or is it?
It's 1 year. It expires at the end of this year, and there's a 60-day termination.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if we were to move this for additional consideration at the June meeting, that would not be problematic in terms of continuing the service. So Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so, I mean, I agree that it's not apples to apples, but it's, the clearest one is the tactical security, because it doesn't include any other fees, and it's starting out at the lowest. So did you have an objection or a recommendation for them?
We weren't as impressed with their presentation in terms of the personnel and the training schedule. Team Signal also had some tremendous references. I mean, truly outstanding references, which were above the others that we interviewed, including tactical.
Councilwoman Tyler.
I find it interesting, and maybe you all can share, with Whitman, they have a 25,000 a month. What does that break down to? Or did they share?
Divided by one.
That breaks down to
5 people, 4 people?
almost between 5 and 6 times what we're paying now. It's a tremendous,
Yeah,
tremendously overpriced bid.
It's,
No, and that-
25,000 a month, I believe we're paying
yeah, the-
6,000-7,000 a month.
But I think that goes into what both council members, R and Salt have said, is that I see 25,000. My question is, does that include the car? Does that include the gas? Does that include this? We don't know what it is. And as it was pointed out, 34 is really not what it is. It's going to be 40-something an hour if we add what the car is. So I would agree that if possible, and it's not that much more work, that you can show more than just the cost per hour. Because I've gone to try to read them and make my own, like Mark said, make her own notes on some. A couple of these companies I do know, and I'll keep my opinion. But I think it's misleading if we just have dollar amount per hour.
Unless there is a motion to approve the proposal from Team Signal, I would suggest that we refer this one to the June meeting as well, and ask for a different layout of the costs from the different vendors. The same information with respect to Team Signal will still apply with respect to their training and other reasons why they were recommended. Councilman Schaefer and then Councilman Mazie.
just regardless of the cost, is there another company that you would recommend besides Team Signal?
Premier was pretty good. Premier got some good references. We felt Team Signal was just slightly stronger, but I would put Premier up there as well.
Okay.
They did interview well with us, yes.
So those were the two.
Those were the two.
Councilman Mazie.
I want to accommodate my colleagues who feel as if they need some more information about these things, and I'm happy to defer it to the June meeting. But Julian and Jason spent a great deal of time with all these presenters. They have checked references. They've have some experience dealing with these folks in the village, and I want to, I want us to be comfortable with what we do, and so we can take another look at the numbers. But I really feel on a management issue of this sort that we need to give great weight to the view of our village manager and the assistant manager who have put in the work on this operation. So I'm happy to wait till June, but my own view is I want to put a great deal of weight on what they recommend.
Yes, Councilwoman Tyler.
If I can suggest this, I would say I think it is important for us to know exactly what is included and not, oh, by the way, later we get this real price. But I think if not doing all 10, I would say do the top 3. And if you can do the top 3 and give as it's been said, give it across the board so we can see the top 3, where they match, where they don't match. I think that's my suggestion of it being fair.
Understood.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item? Then we're going to refer this to the June council meeting, and we'll look for a chart which provides contrast between the top 3 proposals. That moves us on to authorization of signers on the new accounts with People's Bank. Village Manager Mansfield.
As discussed, we have found a new local bank that will waive all charges, and we got approval from the Finance Committee to proceed to switch our accounts from Capital Bank to People's Bank. People's Bank is here in the village on Wisconsin Avenue, right next to the post office. And they have the typical forms and require signers. So I think the Finance Committee indicated that it would be the same 3 signers recommended, which would be the treasurer, the chairman, and the mayor. So the Finance Committee indicated that council should approve this, should vote on this at the public session.
So the recommended signers are, I'm sorry.
The treasurer, the chairman, and the mayor.
Okay. Is there a motion to that effect? Councilman Measy, Councilwoman Tyler. Any discussion? Councilwoman Salt?
Just a quick question. Compared to what the fee increases were proposed to be at Capital Bank, how much money would we be saving moving to People's for the accounts that are targeted to
So
be there?
about it was, in fees alone, it was something like $120, $130 a month is what we were about to be paying at Capital. Capital had been waiving those fees, but they indicated that they can no longer do that unless we increase our balances with them to $1 million, which we had essentially no plans to do and no ability to do. Also, People's has much higher interest rates for the money market account. They've got an account at like 4.5% right now, which is double what we're getting at Capital currently. So that would be
So
also
roughly
just better.
$1,000 less in fees plus more interest income. Is that roughly
A
what
little
you're
more
saying?
than 1,000, but yeah.
A little more than
Plus,
okay.
plus interest income, yes.
Any other questions? There's been a motion by Councilman Measy, support by Councilwoman Tyler, to authorize the treasurer, the mayor, and the chairman as signers on the new account with People's Bank. Councilwoman Salt?
R?
Yes.
R4, Measy? Yes. Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Salt 4, Tyler? Yes. Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk abstain, thank you.
Moves us on to a discussion vote on the recommendation from the Finance Committee for the auditor contract. Councilman Schaefer?
Okay, so I covered this in the committee meeting. This is a 3-year renewal for the, to prepare the audited financial statements. The lowest bid was to maintain our current auditing firm. That was the recommendation of the Finance Committee. So I'll move that we accept the proposal from Lindsay and Associates for the next 3 years.
Is there support for that motion? Councilman R supports. Any discussion? Seeing none, there's been motion and support to award the contract to what's it?
Lindsay and Associates, right?
Yeah, Lindsay and
I always forget the
Associates.
yeah.
Thank you. Councilwoman Salt?
R?
Yes.
R4, Measy? Measy 4, Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Salt 4, Tyler? Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, Pestrunk?
Abstain.
Pestrunk abstain, thank you.
Last item on the agenda is a discussion of the off-duty police agreement. I think this is Councilman Schaefer.
Okay, so you know, this is part of a continuing effort to just bring all of our agreements and contracts up for review. This was a memorandum of understanding that went into effect, I think, March. Well, when did it start? I think March. Yeah, so a little over a year, and there's no mechanism for it to ever get reviewed by the council. When it was implemented, it was with the minimum 4 votes, and it was sort of a, well, I won't characterize how it was done because there might be some difference of opinion, but when it was passed, there was no mechanism in place to ever review it, to go back, to revisit it, to see if there are better alternatives. The town of Somerset, which also had an off-duty police program with the same Montgomery County Police, They discontinued their program last month in its entirety. They replaced it with nothing. There was a joint study by their Public Safety Commission and their Traffic Commission, and they really did a very comprehensive study. It was 33 pages. They concluded that they could not, and obviously there are some differences and there's some similarities, but they concluded that there would be, they couldn't justify maintaining the program. And so, you know, the request from the Finance Committee, we did not make a recommendation. There have been some people that were told, oh, there's going to be a vote to discontinue it. Those people, quite frankly, were misinformed. The recommendation from the Finance Committee was just to put it on the agenda for a discussion, and that's what we've done.
Any other comments from Councilman? Yes, Councilman R.
So in preparation for this discussion and kind of looking into the history, my general impression was that there was a sense of the need to take action to improve kind of community sense of public safety, to increase sense of security, and so the council took action. There's some public sentiment in support of that action. But my sense was that when I went looking for data, when I went looking for sort of a baseline justification for the number of hours, the specific hours, the strength of the force, our relationships with the individual officers, that there wasn't a lot underlying that initial determination. So, and in thinking about more, less, the same, I struggled to make a decision in the absence of even new data. So what I think would be most valuable to me, and I'm interested in the rest of the council's opinion, would be as a next step to really kind of hearing what the community is saying about the value that they feel the officers are bringing, maybe to clear up some confusion about the nature of the officer service, and to make sure we're getting sort of maximum value for our investment. I'd encourage us to actually spend some time and maybe a little bit of money in really pulling some data, both quantitative and qualitative, right, an understanding of the general sense. I think that the Public Safety Committee report earlier this evening talked a lot about intangible benefits from some of these relationships, the kind of second and third order benefits we have by maintaining a relationship with Montgomery County and having this, making an investment in this additional resource. So I'd like to recommend that we, and I've drafted a motion that Councilwoman Salt has a copy of, so I'll read it, but you don't have to write this all in. But I'd encourage us to authorize the village manager in coordination with the Public Safety Committee to procure a security study evaluating the efficacy and impact of our current policing programs, including our existing relationship with Montgomery County and our village-funded officer operations, and make some recommendations for the effective use of our resources to address the public safety and security concerns. I recommend the study is conducted by a qualified consulting firm with experience in law enforcement and security analysis, and the cost of the study not exceed $20,000, and that from the time we select, by the time the village manager and the Public Safety Committee selects a consulting firm and engages them, that we look to have a report within 3 months of that engagement for action on the recommendations by the full committee.
So there's been a motion, which you'll excuse me that I can't completely repeat, but we can
I
repeat
can
it at
repeat
the,
if necessary.
at the appropriate
I would say the
moment.
gist is no more than
Right.
$20,000, no
Yeah.
more than 3 months
Yeah.
to develop some quantitative
Yeah.
and qualitative analysis of our current relationship, its benefits,
Yeah.
and perhaps some recommendations on the future of our community policing
So let me see whether there's
programs.
support for that motion. Is there?
I'll second.
Okay, so there's been a motion and support for it. Questions, comments? Councilwoman Tyler.
The only, one of the only things I would ask is that, for clarification, you're asking for a study and then the results be done in 3 months?
That the Yes, essentially that we receive recommendations, and all of this is negotiable certainly, but that we receive recommendations from a qualified consulting company within 3 months of engagement.
I think that's making it, 3 months is asking a lot.
Would you like to recommend an amendment to that time
Yeah,
frame?
I don't have a problem with that, doing this, but I think you're looking at more 6 to 8 months to gather real information that, from what I hear, that people are looking for. You're not gonna get that in 3 months. You're gonna get it maybe in 6 to 8.
Councilman Maisy, did you want to make that in the form of a motion? Or do you want to have some further
But
discussion?
my question is that also, is that if you're gonna hire somebody to do a study, then you're gonna have to come up with the questions that you wanna know to be done in 3 months.
Again,
And that-
I'm open to discussion. The longer, I wanted to have actionable recommendations for us to be able to make some meaningful decisions. 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, I'm putting this on the Public Safety Committee to
think
some
you-
extent as well, so I'm
I think
open
it's
to your opinions.
fine to do a study if that's what the group wants, but I think it's based on the questions of what it is and the objective that you're going after. Is that what is it that you're trying to achieve? Are you looking at the safety committee, the safetiness of the community? Are you looking at, and I'm not trying to be a nitpick about it, but when you, as we learned during the other survey, we got to be more specific as to what we want. So if we're going to do a study, great, but we have to know what it is that we really want to do, and then be realistic in the time frame.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, so I'm have no real expertise. I'm not sure what we can't get in 3 months that we can get in 6, but why not just put out the proposal and let them tell us how much time they need, so we're not limiting ourselves to good vendors based on how long we tell them they have. Just put out the RFP without it. Let them tell us how much time they have.
Questions and budget, and then let them come back
Yeah.
and tell us how long it'll work, yeah?
So is somebody going to produce the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilman Maisy.
I mean, I guess I'm always reluctant to oppose a study because presumably you get some more information, Daniel, but I'm not sure what we're supposed to find out from this. We have data that Councilwoman Tyler has produced with our current person about how much, what's happened and what's been done. We have uninformed public opinion supporting this. It's never, whenever you ask people, should we have more police people out there? The answer is seldom going to be no. Everybody wants to feel safe, and given the current cultural environment where everybody is petrified of crime, the more cops, the better. Perhaps one on this corner, one on that corner. Then we should move to a gated community, perhaps, where, I exaggerate a little. There's some hyperbole here. So I'm not sure what we're going to get out of this, out of such an expenditure that we don't already know.
I guess what I'm struggling with, and maybe others might have good answers to this question, but if the question was posed, are the number of officers currently patrolling for the number of current hours during the current hours of the day correct? Should it be more? Should it be less? Should they be earlier? Should they be later? I don't know how I would evaluate those alternatives that I think may be the catalyst for some of this discussion. We've heard, for example, I feel safer later at night knowing there are more police officers. We don't have police officers later at night. That's not a thing. So I'm just concerned that there isn't that we are all making decisions off of our gut, and I'm wondering if there's a way to sharpen my gut.
If I may, first of all, we have to understand what an MOU is. and I think that's where some people who I've engaged in conversation, is that MOU is not a definitive contract. And we've adjusted, and when I say we, the safety committee, along with Julian, Jason, we've sat with Captain Kokinas and said, you know, let's change the hours and see how this works. We know it's lighter, longer. Let's put 2 days out the week and work this shift. We already know from him is that the crime in this community does not go after 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. There's enough stats to prove that, which is why we shifted to do a 2 to 8 shift, which is when we had the vast majority of people there. We also made changes when we saw the traffic increase and people avoiding public school buses when they're there to pick up kids, that they were running past the signs. So we said, hey, can we make this change? Can we have them during this time peak? So we've made those changes looking at what is affecting the community right now. So my question is, I don't have a problem doing a study. It's just that now, are you saying that the committee needs to come up with the questions that we then will ask the consultant that we want them to do the study?
I mean, I guess if you're already doing these adjustments and making decisions on things like time and volume, number of hours, then maybe what we need is you and Julian and the Public Safety Committee to brief us. Maybe we don't need a study if you're already doing that work.
Which is why we got Captain Kokinos.
But I'm not sure that answers the question, though, right? That's just a list of activities that took place over the course of a 12-month period. It doesn't give us comparators, right? Sorry, Roy, go ahead.
Councilwoman Salt?
I saw Roy.
Go ahead,
Well,
I saw, recognize,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Councilwoman Salt, please.
You know, one thing I'd really like to know, and in quite a long time, I remember you talking about this, Cheryl, is why can't we get a guard that's a lot cheaper? An unarmed guard can we study that? Because I noticed, many of the sort of tasks on the report were, forgive my language, doable by a guard who's cheaper.
If I'll say,
It's something that I think should be considered. Mhm.
okay, so it goes back to two things. I think you guys talked about it earlier, in that it was $40,000 was spent for, I don't know when that occurred, but Councilman Schaefer read it on the report that he had up on the screen. So I don't know what that 40,000 entailed and when that occurred.
That was what we spent, I believe, in fiscal year '23.
Okay. What was it?
For the police patrol. For the off-duty police officers because it went into effect whatever March, so from March to the end of the fiscal year.
So you
in
spent
June.
40,000, but it came across like that was another kind of project. So that was just
No.
the end of that year.
That's correct.
So it was 40,000 because it was the end of that year.
Right, and this is the
So
first.
the first year
Full
we
year.
now see.
Yes.
Okay, so now going back to the guard comment, yes, you can do guards cheaper, but I will tell you this. You have to you need to know what you want them to do, who's gonna supervise them, how much you're willing to pay, and the insurance that goes with that. Are they armed, are they not? That can get more costly. That I can tell you, because I can tell you that average rate with
Do you mean the
armed?
armed is more costly?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I was suggesting unarmed. Mhm.
Okay.
Let me see, Mayor White again, whether you have any comments to make, and then I'll make a suggestion.
Just a practical question, what line item would this study come out of? Because I thought we were trying to find ways of cutting expenses, and $20,000 seems like a big chunk of money for this study.
I mean, I guess arguably it would come out of the security line item. We're paying $175,000 without a lot of data to support that continued investment. So I'm suggesting investing a little bit of that money to establish the value of the continued expense for the foreseeable future.
Two things. If you're taking it out of the 175, then you've already cut the police that you have in place. So the budget that's passed is based on the number of people and the hours that's already working. So if you take 20,000 out of that, then you're going to cut that budget and you're going to cut the people.
I'm not sure it's 1 for 1 though, right? That's an estimated cost? I mean, I guess I should defer to the expert.
There is a rate that the Montgomery County Police do charge. So my suggestion is at this point, because we'll be going back and forth, if you or anybody else on the council has questions that they would like answers to, I would suggest you send it to the safety committee so that we can come up with what it is that you're really looking for. And that way, we'll be able to give you a definitive answer, because you can get the answers if we know what questions you want to know. I always say security is something that people just look at it willy-nilly. But as you see in this report, which Julian and Jason and I have worked with Captain Kokinas on, is that these are the things that have been working. These are the things that they found. These are the things that they've done all year. If there's more that you want, then we need to know what it is that we want the police to do. Again, an MOU is very vague. If there's certain things that we really want them to do, and it's within legal realms of what they can and cannot do, then we'll ask that question. Can you do this? Can you do that? So it's real hard to say we want more information without knowing what the information is that you really want.
One more comment, I think, Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah,
Nice.
so the memorandum of understanding, and that's true, it's very, very vague. It doesn't even specify how many hours. We could have somebody 1 day a week, we could have 24-hour service. It's not outlined. I think part of what Councilman R is getting at is this the right number of hours? Is it too many? There's somehow this assumption has taken hold that 40 is the right number. We don't know.
So I go back to my same statement. Then write to the committee and say, what is it that you want to know, instead of us doing the knee-jerk reaction that got us into this situation. Let's figure out what it is you want to know.
So let me make a suggestion, since I don't think there's a consensus about what to do on a number of different elements of this. Why don't we ask the Public Safety Committee to come back in July with a recommendation on this issue, and between now and then, council members who have thoughts and opinions about what this study or what this analysis, whatever it might be, should provide those comments to the chair of the Public Safety Committee. And then in July, we'll have something to look at that likely, hopefully, addresses some of the issues that have been raised here.
Yeah, so I have a question about this report. It says March to March. Do we know is that like a 13-month period, or is it 12 months?
That's the March to March.
Well, yeah, and I just point out, this is the first we've ever gotten. It would have really been helpful if during the year we got something, I guess, rather than.
If that's something that you want to buy
Well,
annual report, then
So
again, it's a general.
Okay.
The MOU was very vague, and I've said that. I had questions when I was not on the council that I asked in the audience.
Right,
So-
but what's in the MOU is
So
completely
wait, so,
separate from what's
okay,
in this.
so what about giving the Public Safety Committee an opportunity to process this and come back to the council in July? Any reservations about that?
No, I had a question.
Mayor White, go ahead.
I'm fine with that suggestion. I wanted to ask Roy, he was shaking his head no when Cheryl said, if you deduct the $20,000, what
It
was?
had to do, we've over budgeted. The actual number, I think was 162 we're paying now, and then we bumped it up, and then Councilmember Tyler had Finance Committee meeting asked to make it 175, so we accommodated that, but the actual number, based on what we're spending now, is 162,000, so there is some cushion to
And
pay
the
for a study.
reason I said that,
There is some cushion.
to take it up, was that if there was an increase by Montgomery County for their cost, so we had to put in an adjustment to be in a position to say, yes, this is where we are now, instead of coming back and saying, oh, we need more money. If we're gonna not pay that much and they don't go up in their fee, then we have extra money and a surplus.
Okay.
Councilman, are you comfortable with moving this to July meeting?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. And is there any objection to doing that? No. Okay, then what we'll do is, this is referred back to the Public Safety Committee, and as council, we'll look for a recommendation from the Public Safety Committee at the July meeting. With that, we have concluded our business. Is there a motion to adjourn? Support? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.